Dame Priti Patel, Shadow Foreign Secretary, joins me now from the security conference in Munich. It's a little chilly, Dame Priti. Thank you very much indeed for bearing with the cold to speak to GB News this morning. Thank you. There's been quite a theme around Brexit and perhaps the reversal of Brexit with what Keir Starmer has been saying at the conference. What do you make of his quest to realign with the European Union on issues such as energy, security, the military?
Well, Camilla, you'll know my views. I completely disagree with his attempt to reverse Brexit. He doesn't have the mandate to do it. And of course, we've been watching him over the last 12 months on our fisheries, giving them away with that 12-year deal that he has agreed with the EU. And I would argue that this is not the right time to be doing this, of course. His approach is completely wrong. He's not transparent about this. And I have to say, it is desperate politics, basically, to appease his backbenchers and his political party. And quite frankly, there are so many major domestic issues that he should be focused on. And it's yet another distraction strategy by Keir Starmer and his failing prime ministership while he has lost authority in his party.
Although doesn't he have the support of Donald Trump's right-hand man on such issues, Marco Rubio, who's also said to the conference that he too supports the idea of aligning with the EU, maintaining that relationship between the US and the European Union. Some could argue that Starmer's only leaning into that.
Well, actually, I think the two are totally different. I think what Secretary Rubio has been referring to is absolutely in terms of the strategic partnership and alliance, the historic alliance that has existed between the United States and Europe for decades. And his speech was well considered and well thought out in the way in which he delivered it. And he spoke about that historic relationship. We know very, very well that Britain stands strong outside of the EU. It was the United Kingdom that led the response to Russia's illegal invasion in Ukraine. And on that basis alone, this is not about, greater alignment with the EU on issues such as climate and all those political areas that Keir Starmer is focusing on. The reality is right now, what we've heard from the Americans at the security conference is that we all need to put hard cash back into our defence and security. We have to address the world that we live in right now, not look backwards, but look forwards. And we have to confront the axis of authoritarianism and those states that are working to undermine our democratic values and freedoms.
There's nothing more important than keeping you and your loved ones safe online. With so many VPN options available, choosing the right one can be pretty daunting. And with their Valentine's Day sale, this video's sponsor, ExpressVPN, is making the choice easier for GB News viewers. It's the easiest way to stay safe online, protect your money, and save big for less than £2 a month. Click the link in the video's description or scan the QR code today.
Keir Starmer stated in the Labour manifesto that there were red lines he wouldn't cross. He didn't want to re-enter the single market or the customs union. Do you believe him?
No, of course, I do not believe him at all. I think he's completely untrustworthy on these issues. He says one thing and does another. And of course, this is a prime minister that I think is now up to U-turn number 15 or 16. The British public can see that we've got a weak and feeble prime minister. He says one thing, then he's sort of like bullied and forced into different positions by his own backbenchers. He's not in control of his party, his government, and the country can see we have a weak prime minister. And the reality is when it comes to all matters on the EU, he's desperate to rejoin the EU club. And, that is his persona. And he was once shadow Brexit secretary and he was campaigning for another referendum. So he's not put our national interests first at all. And this is a political agenda that he is trying to pursue. And I can tell you it's one that's going to be detrimental to our country and our economy.
There could be some who criticise the Tories for not maximising our post-Brexit potential enough, and that has then opened the door to this kind of reversal. If the Tories had done better at maximising Brexit opportunities, you wouldn't have people in this country suffering with what's known as regrets.
Well, I disagree with that, Camilla, because, you've also got a government that is lauding up its ability to do trade arrangements, free trade agreements around the world. And that is very much because of Brexit. So whether or not it's with America, whether or not it's with India, the fact that we can actually cooperate in different ways is exactly what Brexit is about. Yes, it takes time, but do not forget we have one of the biggest trade partnerships now with our friends, in Asia, Pacific countries, and a region that really matters to our country. So that is absolutely Brexit working. Outside of our membership of the EU, we've been able to do much more in terms of defence and security when it comes to obviously supporting Ukraine. And just a final point, here at the Munich Security Conference, there's been a lot of frustration aired about the fact that we're all held back by still working within certain institutions that are not necessarily functioning. We heard Senator Rubio speak about the United Nations needing reform. Well, as you absolutely will remember, I was a Secretary of State, the first Secretary of State to call for reform of some of these institutions and organisations, cutting back their money and putting in performance criteria. That's the world that we live in. And Britain has the agility now outside of Europe to get on and do the things that matter to our country, that matter to the British people, to British taxpayers, and actually stand tall in the world. And that's exactly what we should be doing much more of.
We've had this extraordinary revelation from Porton Down that Alexei Navalny may have been poisoned with toxin from a frog. Meanwhile, we've got Starmer accusing Reform of being too close to Russia, or at least soft on Russia. Do you agree with his analysis?
Well, I think, first of all, Reform will have to account for their own conduct and behaviour, and the fact that it is a fact that one of their members and leaders of their party in Wales has taken money from Russia. That's an absolute outrage and disgrace. They'll face the consequences of their actions. Now, of course, when it comes to Russia, Russia is a threat to our country and has been for well over a decade now. And it was my colleagues in government, our former Home Secretaries and Foreign Secretaries, that took very firm action against Russia. We've had the whole issue of state-sponsored terror and poisoning in our own country. But what I would say is that what we've learned in the last 24 hours around the poisoning, the state-sponsored assassination of Alexei Navalny is absolutely horrific. And of course, Russia has a long and dark history of state-sponsored assassinations that dates back to the Cold War. And it ranged from Novichok to ricin to cyanide, and now this latest poison that the Russians create in their own laboratories. So this demonstrates that Russia is a threat to all of us. They're part of the evil axis of authoritarianism. We cannot ignore the threat that Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, the whole axis poses to our own country, to our own way of life, to our freedoms and democracy. And Camilla, for the first time, certainly since the end of the Cold War, we're fighting for those values and freedoms, and we absolutely need to stand strong in the world, but we've got to put our money where our mouth is. We've got to be resourcing our defence, our intelligence, our security apparatus to absolutely confront these challenges that we are now facing. This is a very, very serious time. And at this conference, we've heard the Americans speak about that. We've heard many of our other friends and allies speak about this too. And we can't just sort of give issues, speak about words and rhetoric anymore about what we'd like to do. We have to stand up and actually deal with these issues head on.
Can we bring it back to domestic matters for a moment, Dame Priti, and just talk about Sir Jim Ratcliffe's comments about the UK being colonised by migrants? Do you agree with that rhetoric?
Well, look, first and foremost, Jim Ratcliffe has to account for his own comments. But I do just want to say, when it comes to the issue of migration, we've discussed this many times. We have to be strong and we have to be firm in terms of the way the government of the day, and including not just the government, but the policies that we put forward, how we deal with these issues. The public have major concerns. We have major concerns. And as you know, with my party, we're fundamentally clear in terms of what we would do now. We have to change our laws. We have to leave the ECHR. We have to have policies that actually deal deal with these issues, people's fears, concerns, anxieties, and effectively change our laws. And that's the policy position that my party is putting forward. You know my views when it comes to illegal migration. We have to have stronger deterrence. We have to remove illegal migrants. We cannot allow them to continue in the merry-go-rounds of trying to go to the courts and claim asylum in this country. We have had all the warnings for too long, and we need to act. And that is why my party is putting the policies forward that we are on this issue.
But you do appreciate that many won't trust you on those pledges, not least because the Tories, and when you were Home Secretary, allowed in record numbers of migrants, 745,000 in 2022 when you were in post. So you can appreciate that people regard your comments on this with a degree of cynicism.
Well, they can, Camilla, but what I'd say now is that even when I was Home Secretary, when it came to illegal migration, we had those policies on tough deterrence. We've got a government now. This is about the current government failing to deal with these issues and address these issues. My party is clear. We're going to change our laws. And that isn't just about words and rhetoric. We have done the work when it comes to the policy delivery to leave the ECHR. Name another political party that has made the commitment, demonstrated the work, shown the frameworks that would bring the policy deliveries and operationalise those policies. And we are committed to bringing that forward. It'll be part of our manifesto, and we know how we will deliver that. That's the fundamental difference between us and every other political party.
Dame Priti, one final very quick question, because we are struggling slightly with the reception between us and Munich. You were once a trade secretary. Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor was a trade envoy before you were in that department, I must stress that. But there are now growing questions about his conduct in office. Do you think there should be a parliamentary inquiry into how he behaved as trade envoy during 2001 and 2011?
Well, Camilla, let me say a few things. First of all, I was not in the Trade Department, but this is such a serious scandal and it's engulfing the whole of government. And quite frankly, in answer to your question, the answer is yes. Everyone that's been involved, should be subject to the right kind of inquiries, police investigations. And what has taken place and happened is absolutely abhorrent. And it's right that everyone is scrutinised in terms of their roles, what has happened, information, papers that may have been shared and disclosed. I think the country will feel absolutely sick with what we are now discovering with these disclosures, and full transparency and the rule of law should be applied to absolutely everyone that was involved in all of this.
Dame Priti Patel, Shadow Foreign Secretary, thank you very much indeed for joining me this morning from Munich.
Thank you, Camilla.